last when Peter introduced. It's on the Beatitudes. So I'm going to start with, blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted, from Matthew chapter 5, verse 4. Matthew chapter 5, verse 4. So I've asked Adam to read from Matthew chapter 11, verse 28 to 30, because that it's the outcome and the results and the lesson that we need to learn after learning through the next couple of weeks on Beatitude. So Beatitude is a series of lessons. It's not something that we learn one day and that's it, we move on. So the next couple of weeks, we have a few speakers who's going to come up here and speak on the Beatitudes. But next week, I think we have James from Sydney who will be teaching on a separate topic. So we will still go through on a series of Beatitudes. Now, the title given to me today, when I looked at it, I was like, oh, this is not an easy one. It is not an easy one. Because if you read properly, blessed are those who mourn, who weep, who feel sad, for they will be comforted. How do you feel comforted when you feel sad? How do you feel happy when you're sad? How do you feel glad when you cry? You know, the idea of mourning, the idea of mourning after a blessing, especially when you get a blessing and you start feeling sad, it's contradictory to what we are taught from child. You know, we are very simple-minded human being. When we are sad, we are sad. When we're happy, right? Our logical mind kind of like twists a little bit when we say we should be happy when we are sad. Mourn means weep, feeling sorrow, sadness. Why are we asked by the Bible to mourn and show sorrow and sadness when we receive blessing? I think very few people today can really admit that we should feel sad when God blesses us. It's an interesting conversation. I struggled the last 1 week or so when I prepared the lesson. But today, everyone living out in the world, every human being, we are all taught to feel good. We are all, given instructions, given guidance, given, lessons to feel good, live life to the fullest. Life is short. Do what you want to do. Don't worry, be happy. There's even a song that says, don't worry, be happy. We are asked to put away all our tears and mourning. And if you feel sad, there's always a way to come up from that, that kind of states. It's very, very interesting how the Bible states the opposite. Don't worry, be happy. The parallel verse from Matthew chapter 5, verse 4 is Luke chapter 6, verse 21. So Luke chapter 6, verse 21. Let me get rid of this thing. Okay. Luke chapter 6, verse 21, where the Bible used the word weep, which means mourn as well. Blessed are you who weep now, for you shall laugh. Luke chapter 6. You can cry and you shall laugh. Again, the mourning that Jesus taught here is the sorrow. It's the sorrow that pierces the heart. So sad, pierces our heart, so sad, until we start to cry. Until we start to cry, until we shed tears. Now, we know about Peter. Peter cried, Peter wept bitterly after denying Christ 3 times before the rooster crowed. Everyone remembers the story, right? Remember the story about the rooster crow and Peter denied Christ 3 times. But look at what happened to Peter. He wept. He cried. He felt sorrow. He felt sad. He felt sad for what? He felt sad because Christ is going through what he was supposed to go through. He felt sad because his master is going through difficulty for good. If we want to know something about somebody's character, we want to try to find out what makes him laugh and what makes him cry. What we laugh at or what we cry over shows our personal values, right? If you look at someone and try to analyze that person over a period of time, you look at how he behaves, you look at how he laughs and how he cries, and we roughly know that person's attitude. This is especially true for young children. Agree? The younger they are, the easier they are for us to understand their character. Randall spoke about teaching. I can't relate to that because I'm not a teacher, but it's easier to understand young adults compared to an older adult. A child may laugh over a serious matter. The child may think that a simple thing is funny, but an adult may think that no, it's not. It's not serious. We have to be very serious about it. A young teenager who goes through, education, school may think that this is so difficult. I don't want to go through it anymore. Bye, Randall. I won't see you again next week. But no, that's hard life. We need to go through difficulty, to go through challenges, to go through, all these difficulties in life to be better in life. That's what life is about. Last year, a couple of months ago, when I say last year, I shared with most of us a story about a house being burnt down 2 houses away from where I live. I didn't share with you a part where this family has, I think, 4 or 5 kids. The youngest was 3. She's a girl. She's a 3-year-old girl who doesn't have any clue what happened. Okay, so you can imagine that 3-year-old girl was running around, happily playing when the fire is burning and things are going on. Funny, isn't it? The family is in distress. They were trying to save things out, trying to comfort each other. But that 3-year-old just run around happily because there's so many people around. There's a fire truck trying to put out the fire. First time up close and personal to a fire truck. The girl was having so much fun. Why? I don't think she has experienced any pain and sorrow. She has never experienced any sadness. She probably doesn't understand, maybe until today, doesn't understand what's going on. Maybe she would, years to come. So children experience things very, very different. On the other hand, children cry over things that may be small matter, trivial to us. When we see a spider at home, the net will shriek and scream and sometimes cry over a spider. Okay, it's trivial to us. We just smack it with a paper or something. But it's a big matter. It's a big matter. Tripping over and falling down. Okay, a 2, 3-year-old kid may trip over and fall and start crying. I don't see Naomi doing that, which is good. Naomi is a very strong girl. She can trip and fall and she continue running. That's perseverance, right? But some children are different. Some children, they trip and fall a little and they start crying and wailing, I want mommy, I want mommy. It's different. Some children may not understand the meaning of pain, the meaning of death. We see story about fatal accident, whole family, mom and dad died during an accident, but the child lived because of the child seat or something. And the child doesn't realize that parents are not there anymore until many, many years to come. They probably only cry when their toys are taken away. They probably only cry when things that they love is gone, but not looking at a bigger picture. Let's come back to Matthew chapter 5, verse 4. How can we really feel blessed when we are mourning? As human, we learn how to avoid sadness, sorrow, and pain. We learn how to prepare for failure. We learn how to even prepare for death. Death in a relative. Okay, we learn a lot of things as we go older. Yet, when we check the Bible carefully, there are multiple examples where mourning is because of something good, something joyful, something happy. In Jeremiah chapter 9, verse 1, as the prophet continued to preach to Israel about the coming judgment, the prophet wept for a woman who had lost their husbands or children, and he was mourning over the killing of Jews for their sin. Let me read to you Jeremiah chapter 9, verse 1. Oh, that my head were water and my eyes a fountain of tears, that I might weep day and night for the slain of the daughter of my people. He wept, he cried for those who did not perish. In Acts chapter 20, verse 31, Paul reminded the elders at Ephesus to keep watch of the flock and beware of wolves, because Paul himself was trying to keep the church on the right path. It's not an easy task to keep the church on the right path. Let me read Acts chapter 20, verse 31. Therefore, watch and remember that for 3 years I, Paul did not cease to warn everyone night and day with tears. Paul worked hard to keep the church right. Jeremiah worked hard and cried when people died. Jeremiah shed tears of disappointment to the women who lost their loved one. Paul shed tears of concern to the Ephesians. The sorrow that I explained comes from sin, from human conscience, and from a broken heart. Sadness comes from people who disobey God. Sadness comes from people who become unbelieving or don't believe in God anymore. Jesus never tried to escape the sadness of life. God did not tell his disciples to go out and look for sadness. But he told them that he could transform our sadness and become better in life. He told us that we should understand what he has for us to live our life. Mourning and sorrow can never make a person better. In fact, many expert think they actually make people worse. Agree? If you're sad and you continue to be sad, it makes things worse. But how about mourning and sorrow plus finding a way in God to put in our life? Now, this is what is missing in many people who don't believe in God. They continue to mourn, they continue to feel sad, and they don't have anything to help them to continue to live. We, on the other hand, as the Bible, we, on the other hand, as God, are we using that tool when we are in need and in sorrow? The Bible says it will make us stronger spiritually, and I believe physically as well. If we are to experience that feeling of mourning, we must recognize that there are a few types of sadness that we need to address them. It's going to be a bit technical. I'd like to share with you, but not too detailed. But it's important for us to understand that there are a few kinds of sorrow, a few kinds of mourning that even the Bible explains. Firstly, there is something called a natural sorrow. A natural kind of sorrow, it's natural to everyone. You and I, we're experiencing it every day, regardless of whether you're saved, you're not saved, you're Christian or not, whether you're rich, you're poor, you're old, you're young, educated, uneducated, everybody experiences it, okay? It affects everyone. Now, in the story of Nehemiah, Nehemiah sat down and wept when he heard that the wall of Jerusalem had been broken down and the gates were burned. Nehemiah wept when something happened. Solomon said in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, to everyone there is a season, a time to every purpose under heaven, a time to be born, a time to die, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. So natural sadness is something that we experience as human beings, looking at the circumstances that happens around us, okay? But we know how to heal. We heal as time passes. It's a process that every one of us as an adult will go through in our life that enables us to accept, to a certain degree, pain, to a certain degree, how to live with to a certain degree of pain in our life. Some people think that even crying might alleviate the suffering. That's true. Some people think that crying is a sign of weakness. It depends. There's no clear answer on how we address the pain and sorrow in life, but that is natural sorrow. That's how we live. Now, on the flip side, there is something called an unnatural mourning. Now, not in the Bible, not explicitly mentioned in the Bible, but I think we can look at it from a kind of effect that affects our life that contradict what God wants us to experience. It's a bit tricky over here, but let me try to explain. Now, natural sorrow is like pain from falling down, pain from death of a loved one, or pain that we experience every day. The unnatural sorrow bit is a wound that may be deeper and may not recover in a shorter span of time, because we may feel pain in the longer run and it sometimes might not recover at all. Now, a psychological study has found that a typical self-centered person may use other people, now listen to this, they use other people to make his own life happy and pleasant. Now, because of this, it actually isolate that person, isolate him from the real world. Now, follow me. And when that person loses the people, the person that make his life good, his mourning begins. So this person that uses others people's life, self-centered, selfish, he wants to live life to himself. He's using everyone else to make his life happy. And when that happiness is not there anymore, that mourning begins. That moment of sadness begins. That is when that person who is self-centered begins to feel sad. So that's the definition of unnatural sadness. It's not something that causes us to be sad immediately, but it's a cause that because of his selfishness, he becomes like that. It's a bit of a challenge to explain to you, but I hope you grab it a little bit. Fear is another cause of unnatural sadness. It may be a fear of the future, a fear of change, a fear of moving to a new environment, or even fear of death itself. Too much crying, too much sadness eventually become a shield. You know what a shield is? A shield like a barrier. You know, you cry too much, you feel sad too much, stop us or eventually make us feel, not fearful at all. We might turn around using that shield and say, no, I don't have time to do this anymore. No, I'm too busy to do this, or I'm too afraid to do this and that, because why not? I'm just afraid. That fear created a barrier for us to go on with life. And the fear, if you leave it there, it will be there for a long, long time. Now, sometimes unnatural grief is brought by guilt. The story of King David. The story of King David explains the unnatural sadness best about his son Absalom. So some of us may remember the story about King David going to a war with his son Absalom from 2 Samuel chapter 18. It's a very lengthy story, but let me try to condense it. In this story of King David, you will find out that his sadness is brought by his own guilt, killing his own son. Not him killing his own son, but going through a series of events, war, and his son died eventually. In 2 Samuel, towards chapter 18, David's son Absalom tried to take the kingdom away from David and almost succeeded. Imagine your son trying to take over your kingdom if you are the ruler of the right kingdom. Okay? In the Old Testament, describe Absalom as a good-looking son, a proud person who is very concerned about his duty, and he secretly planned to overthrow his father's kingdom and to drive David out from Jerusalem. He took over the palace and planned to attack David's force, and ultimately wipe them off. So a bad son wants to turn against the father. To cut the story short, David won a battle. David said no, he went out, fought with his son. Absalom was killed, a death he deserved. Now, before David ordered his execution, David begged to his army, his people, deal gently for my sake with the young man, even with Absalom. When David heard that Absalom was killed, he was greatly sorrowful. In 2 Samuel chapter 18, verse 33, David mourned for his son. The king was deeply moved and went up to the chambers over the gate and wept. And as he went, he said, he said, "Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, would God I had died for thee. Oh, Absalom, my son, my son." As King David continued to be sad over his son, only Joab had to remind him of his duty as king. He was so sad. He was so sad that his son has died. but somebody has to bring him back to reality. Now, that is an extreme case of mourning. Should it be better for the father or the son to die? Well, you got to think about it that way. David's mourning over Absalom was recorded as extreme, but as a father, and I think many fathers here will understand, if you have to put your child through this situation, you would probably feel the same. Okay, it is obvious that Absalom had to be defeated. The soldiers were actually feeling guilty themselves. The soldiers feeling guilty because Absalom had been put to death, and it brought so much sadness to their king, the father. And that is just a fact. We can't help it. David refused to be confronted. Like I said earlier, it took a blunt speech from Joab to show King David how selfish he was. If I read 2 Samuel chapter 19, verse 6 to 7, chapter 19, verse 6 to 7, 2 Samuel, for today I perceive that if Absalom had lived and all of us has died today, that it would have pleased you well. That's what Joab said. Now therefore arise, go out and speak comfort to your servant. For I swear by the Lord, if you do not go out, not one will stay with you this night. Imagine the king was scolded by one of his troops or his captain. I'm not too sure what his position is or was. He was advised, scolded by his servant Joab. Now, finally, there's one more thing called godly mourning. Godly mourning is the result of a person having experienced godly blessing, God's blessing. The only right thing for a person to do when he sees and knows that his spiritual needs is in trouble is to turn to God and to embrace it. Now, many will not come to this conclusion. Many people who don't believe in God will not come to this solution because they don't see a need in God. They don't see there is a need in their spiritual well-being. There's always a bucket for spiritual growth in our life. The person who is sincerely poor in spirit will mourn over his sin. Come to God, be comforted. True comfort can be found in the Lord, the Bible says. Now, it's a short lesson today because we talk a lot about mourning. We talk a lot about how God would treat us if we come to Him. I want to close by just reading to you Matthew chapter 11, verse 28 to 30 again, which Adam did read very well. Now, Matthew chapter 11, come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden. Come to me. God said, come to me. Accept my word. If you feel sad, if you have something to be concerned about, take my yoke upon you. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. For I am gentle, lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your soul. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. There is no magical pill to take if you feel sad. There is no drinks that you can drink or movies you can watch to erase all your sadness and burden. But the Bible says, come into me. Fill the last bucket in our life, the spiritual bucket, which many people think it's not there. Fill it with things that you love to do in church. Fill it with things that you love to do with God. I don't have the answer for you. It's a solution which every one of us has to find ourselves. But God said, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Verse 30. Now, if you are subject to the invitation of the Lord today and would like to come to God, I urge you to think about your salvation. And I urge you to think about what you have dedicated your life and promised to God to do this year.